From The Australian, here's what's on the front. I'm Claire Harvey. It's Friday, October 18. Nine Entertainment has a systemic cultural issue with abuse of power and authority, bullying, discrimination and sexual harassment. That's according to a review commissioned by the organisation itself. But there are no findings about individual incidents or allegations, leading to fears nobody will be held accountable. You can read all the detail right now at theaustralian.com.au. Free lunch for every school kid sounds great, but it comes with a $1.4 billion price tag, and it's turning up the heat in the Queensland election campaign. Today, our reporter joins us from a famous pub with a big yarn about the man who wants to be Premier.
What's your name?
Amelia.
Amelia. And what's your favourite thing to have for lunch?
Grape.
This is Queensland's Labor Premier Stephen Miles interviewing some preschoolers.
My favourite fruit is nuggets.
What's your name?
Amelia likes fruit. Isaiah likes nuggets. And Miles, who's desperately hoping to keep Labor alive in the upcoming election, is hoping their mums and dads like free lunches. That's his big policy announcement of the week, and it's captivated parents. It's also led us on a deep dive into Miles's TikTok, and it turns out lunch is a bit of a theme.
All right, let's make a sandwich, eh?
There's a stack of TikToks where Miles stands in his kitchen, wearing a series of T-shirts tight enough to show off his guns, making sandwiches, sometimes accompanied by his daughter.
Delegations, lots of announcements, including one I'm really excited about, which is a massive announcement.
There's chopping and shredding and buttering. It's quite gripping. He's slicing a tomato. He's, putting the tomato straight on the bread and then pouring salt on it. Cheese, salami, raw onion?
Oh, he really loves sandwiches. He loves making a Sunday sandwich with his 10-year-old daughter, Bridie. I think it's part of his kind of daggy dad shtick. He's doing it a little bit more convincingly than Scott Morrison did, I think.
This is one of The Australian's gun reporters, Sarah Elks, who's part of our team covering Queensland politics.
And then he supercharged that at the ALP campaign launch on Sunday when he said that Queensland Labor, if re-elected, would provide a free school lunch for every kid between prep and year 6, so all of primary school, every day.
We caught her in the middle of a busy day on the campaign trail, and she'd just taken her first sip of a beer that looked icy and pretty delicious.
Just excuse my beer. It's really hot. It's hot. I got up at 4 a.m. to get on the plane.
Sarah's got some experience with school lunches as a real-life issue as well as a policy debate.
And as a new school mum myself, I can say that I don't love making school lunches, but I also understand that it's really tricky for school tuck shops. Ours has one paid staff member and the rest rely on volunteers. Sometimes it's really tricky to find volunteers, and there's not been a huge amount of detail from Stephen Miles and Labor about exactly how he's going to roll out these school lunches to every single kid, particularly in regional and rural areas where some schools don't even have a tuck shop. But I think it goes to show that Labor is really focusing on cost of living relief.
There's been a bit of scoffing about the free lunch policy, in particular this $1.4 billion price tag. What's your take on how ordinary Queenslanders will receive this policy?
From talking to my small focus group of ordinary Queenslanders, friends and family, I think that there is some acceptance that the government is trying to relieve cost of living pressures and everyone is doing it a little bit tough. But I think they're really taking a leaf out of, say, the PMC's book. The Queensland Parents and Citizens Association released a statement to say, thank you for recognising that cost of living is a problem, but we would prefer this money being spent on the cost of school expenses, stationery and uniforms and excursions and all that kind of thing. So I think that there is scepticism, and also I think the problem with these kind of measures with a third-term government is people might be happy to accept them, but it may not be enough to win over their votes when there's such a strong it's time factor that's kind of ricocheting through the electorate.
Coming up, Sarah's been breaking big yarns about David Crisafulli's past. After the break, what he says about his record in business. For reporters, life on a campaign trail can be hard going. The leaders load you onto buses, but you don't get told where you're going or what you're doing until you arrive. It's political parties' way of avoiding nasty surprises, like protesters showing up. But it makes for long days for journos. So where have you been today?
We flew from Brisbane to Townsville and we did a press conference outside the Youth Detention Centre in Townsville, and then we drove up the road to Ingham, which is David Crisafulli's hometown, and we went to the tennis club. He's now gone to his favourite deli, and we're just having a lunch in, allegedly, the pub that Slim Dusty wrote the song Pub With No Beer about.
Oh, what a terrible place. There's a pub with no beer.
Although it has beer now, which is definitely a plus.
You're on the David Crisafulli comeback tour now in his hometown of Ingham, Sarah, and you've been digging into his past, what he did after losing his seat in the Queensland Parliament a few years back.
David Crisafulli lost his seat, Mundingburra, which is a Townsville seat, in 2015 when the Newman government was swept out of power. When he found himself without a seat, he looked to the private sector for employment. The first thing he did was get some consulting work for a company called Outcome Results, which was like a recruitment company for unemployment training providers. So they found people who were long-term unemployed and connected them with registered training organisations. Outcome Results was a company that was run by a gentleman called Rabia Krayem, and he is a long-term associate of Mr Crisafulli's. And in the dying days of the Newman government, David Crisafulli, as a local member, boasted that he secured a taxpayer-funded grant worth about $321,000 for Outcome Results to set up a call centre in Townsville to shift its operations from Melbourne to Townsville. And what we found out is that soon after Mr Crisafulli lost his seat of Mundingburra, he then became a consultant for Mr Krayem's Outcome Results. Following that consultancy work, he then agreed to be the sole director and the chief executive of a registered training organisation that Mr Krayem was the half owner of. And this is a business that has now come back to haunt Mr Crisafulli in terms of questions about its running. It ultimately failed. It fell into liquidation a couple of months after Mr Crisafulli left that business in April 2016. And while he was only there for 4 months, I think questions do need to be asked about what he knew when he entered the business, what he did as its sole director and the person who was in charge of running the business, and then what he did afterwards.
Here's Sarah taking on Crisafulli at a press conference just before the beer in Ingham on Thursday.
Can I ask some questions about your business, if that's okay, please? Why did you leave Southern Edge Training on April 1 in 2016?
Because my promise of capital didn't come through. I was in the business for 4 months and I met every single one of my obligations.
Sarah versus Crisafulli kept going for a solid 8 minutes.
Based on what Cameron Dick said. And he spent 72 hours talking about the Supreme Court of Victoria.
I'm not talking about the Supreme Court of Victoria.
But I am, because it's related to...
No, it's really not. I got a statement from the Australian Skills Quality Authority last night to say that...
You to read the report.
I have read the report, Mr. Crisafulli. The allegation was that the company traded while in...
His heart really must sink when he sees reporters from the Australian showing up at his press conference every day. We spoke to Lydia Lynch last week about his difficulty answering questions about how he's going to handle the issue of abortion if he's elected. What's been your sense of his inability or unwillingness to answer some pretty simple questions about this issue?
It has been unfortunate as a reporter and disappointing as a reporter and as a Queenslander to ask these simple and relevant questions about Mr. Crisafulli's personal policy position on things and his party's policy position on things, and also issues that are on the public record about his business dealings, and be met with non-answers. I don't want anyone to feel sorry for reporters. We're used to people not answering our questions, but I think particularly during an election campaign, it's voters who deserve that transparency and that accountability. I think to not answer really straightforward questions is being disrespectful to voters.
Sarah Elks is a senior reporter with The Australian. You can check out all her reporting, and don't miss our Queensland team's political gossip column Feeding the Chooks at theaustralian.com.au. Thanks for joining us this week on The Front. Our team is Kristen Amiot, Jasper Leake, Leah Tsamaglu, Joshua Burton, Tiffany Dimack and me, Claire Harvey.